Good morning. Welcome back to the Planet Doug podcast for Sunday, January 12th, I believe. It's about 10:30 in the morning. I'm here in Planet Doug Studios in Tanjung, Balai, Sumatra, Malahayati Hotel. And all this morning we've had tons and tons of power failures. One thing I realized is that this hotel actually has its own generator. And I don't know why it took me so long to realize that, because the power would go out, the room would go dark, and it would be dark for a while. Then I'd hear the roar of an engine, and then the lights would come back on. And for some reason, I never made the connection that the roar of the engine was a generator. I just thought the power went out and the power came back on, things like that. But it turns out, no, when the power goes out, we're in darkness for a while, then we hear a generator. And I don't know whether this is a regular occurrence, like do they know in advance the power's gonna be out from 10 until noon every day or something like that. It seems a little bit random. Anyway, if it suddenly goes dark, that's what's happening. The power went out and then they're switching from the main power grid to the generator and back again. That's been happening all morning long. And that keeps me on my toes, I have to say, because I've got a wilderness of technology running at all times. You'd think I was Bill Gates or Elon Musk or something based on the number of devices I'm operating simultaneously in different ways, and that I have plugged in, charging up, or different ways of charging, doing different things. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, when the power goes out, yeah, it keeps me on my toes. So I have a few different things to talk about this morning. Patreon, of course, some YouTube stories, things like that. Hopefully pop culture. I have a few TV shows I want to mention that I've watched recently. But of course, for me and for Planet Doug, the biggest thing is the new Planet Doug Patreon. And I recently had the launch, the official launch of the Patreon, and I set that up with a YouTube video. I went up onto the roof of this hotel and I talked about Patreon, everything about it, all of my plans for it. And then I fired up my laptop and I went over Patreon itself with screenshots and video of how it's put together with a voiceover narration. So it was like nearly an hour-long video, maybe 50 minutes, talking about everything to do with Patreon. And I set that up as a premiere video so that people could watch it and I could watch it with them. And I did that in the past. I started doing that in Thailand and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And as like a travel video would be playing, people would ask me questions and I would reply to them and we'd chat in the live chat window. In this case, there weren't a lot of questions in the chat window, but I guess that's because of the type of video that it was. It was like a technical tutorial in a way, where I'm telling everybody what Patreon is and how it works and what my plans are for it. So it's sort of like an instructional video. So people are hopefully listening carefully. It's like, oh, that's what Patreon is. Oh, that's how it works. Oh, that's what it looks like. Because what I understood as I was working on Patreon, and I would mention it even to other experienced YouTubers, and they would just kind of look at me with this glazed look in their eyes, like, oh yeah, Patreon. And then I found out recently that most of the YouTubers that I talked to about this, they had no idea what I was talking about. They'd heard of Patreon, but they didn't really know what it was. They thought I was setting up a website and like, okay, you got a website, everybody's got a website. And they weren't really focused on what I was saying. And then these were YouTubers. So if they don't even know what Patreon is, a general audience, I realized, probably doesn't know either. Even if they've heard of Patreon, they don't really understand it. So I realized that in me setting up a Planet Doug Patreon, as part of that, I have to teach people about it. Okay, what is it? Where is it? What does it do? I mean, what does it offer me that a YouTube channel doesn't? So I put together that introductory video, and I plan on doing a lot more. That launch video covered all of Patreon very quickly. Well, no, nothing is very quick on Planet Doug, in a very slow manner. That was one funny thing. As I watch a premiere on Planet Doug, I do suddenly see the video anew. Like when I edit and upload a video, it seems fine to me. My videos tend to be longer than average, more detailed than average, a bit slower than the average YouTube video. And I'm fine with that. But then when I watch the video with other people, suddenly I'm much more aware of how slow it is. And I start yelling at the screen, like, come on, speed up here. I'll be talking about a topic to do with Patreon. And as I'm watching a video, I'm like, okay, you've covered it. You're done. Boom, stop talking, move on to the next topic. But me being me, I then go on and on and on and on. And I'm shouting at my laptop during the premiere, like, oh, my GoPro is sliding on my chair here. That's why I'm moving it backwards here. I think I got to put little rubber feet on my tripod. It keeps us sliding around. But anyway, I'm shouting at myself, like, faster, speed up, speed up. So that's always kind of interesting. But anyway, I plan on making more tutorial videos about Patreon. In fact, right now, I'm working on a very long one, an 1.5 hour long video. It's actually not really a Planet Doug video. I'm going to put it on the Planet Doug Learning Curve channel. A lot of people may not even know that I have that channel, but I set that channel up for technology topics because as I learn about new technology, I'm on my own learning curve. And then what I do is I make these long, detailed videos talking about everything that I'm learning, sort of a under the hood tutorial. So this video, this 1.5 hour video, is meant for Patreon creators, not Patreon members. Like if somebody wants to set up their own Patreon, I show how it operates behind the scenes, how you make a post, how you set up tiers, all the choices you make in the background. So I'm putting that video together. And of course, when it's done, I will post it to Patreon. The Patreon members get early access to Learning Curve videos. That's one of the benefits that is listed there, depending on the tier. So that will be available to Patreon members. But then I also plan on making a series of smaller, hopefully like 5-minute long tutorial videos about Patreon. And I'll be putting them on Planet Doug or Planet Doug Behind the Scenes, like focusing on different segments of Patreon one by one. The community chat area will be one video. For example, the collections, how collections work, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, how to navigate Patreon. And I really want people to use the chat area. But in order for people to use it, they have to know it exists and they have to know how to use it. So I plan on teaching Planet Doug subscribers all about Patreon and creating a set of short tutorial videos. But anyway, I started off saying that during the premiere of my launch video, I didn't get a lot of questions or even comments in the live chat window. And that could be because people were focused on what I was saying in the video. It was like a classroom setting. And then they weren't asking me questions in the live chat window because in the video itself, I was answering all the questions. What is Patreon? How does it work? What is this? How does that look? What does this do, etc. So anyway, but in the live chat window, I left comments from time to time, sort of behind the scenes info about the launch video and about Patreon. But anyway, I thought the launch video premiere was successful. There weren't huge numbers of people watching. Because I can see a number there, how many people are watching the video with me, and it would range from 20 people to 30 people. And for me, I consider that to be quite successful, because people on Planet Doug are all over planet Earth, and who knows what time it is in their country. It was like 5, 6 o'clock here in Sumatra and Malaysia, but it was like dawn back in Canada, depending on the time zone, or the United States or Europe. Planet Doug subscribers are in countries all around the world, so of course it could be a very inconvenient time for them. So for me, having 30 people watching is a success in my books. And then quite a few people signed up for the Planet Doug Patreon afterwards. The exact number right now, I think the Patreon has 35 members total right now, and I believe 13 of them have joined one of the paid tiers. And wow, I mean, to me, that is a huge success. I was very, very happy with the response right out of the gate. So basically all of those 35 people, they probably joined because of the launch video. So I would say that is a very successful response. And now that the Patreon is public, officially launched, and people have joined the Patreon, it propelled me along my own learning curve, because now I could try out new things, because up until that point there weren't any members, so I didn't really know how things worked. So for example, all kinds of stuff. Everything I knew about Patreon was about setting it up and organizing it, uploading posts. But now I suddenly had people who were members of the Patreon leaving comments on posts, asking questions, joining the chat window, leaving comments there. So I got to learn all kinds of new things. It's like, oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's how that works. So yeah, that was very, very interesting and exciting for me. And I learned a lot of things. I put one post on Patreon where I listed 7, 8, or 9 things that I learned very quickly about Patreon. One thing I learned, so I'm repeating the list from Patreon. So if you already read that post, but I'll go through these very quickly, I hope. I learned that when someone joins a paid tier, I can send them a personal message. So, and I've done that with everyone, and it ends up in the community. In the community area, there's a chat window, and then there's a direct message window. So if someone joins the Forest Planet, I see that they joined, I can click on their name, and I can send them a message. And I did that with everyone, saying, welcome to the Planet Doug Patreon. And most of the people who joined one of the paid tiers, they're people I'm very familiar with. I've met them in person, quite a few of these people, or we've been communicating online for years. There were a couple of people who had set up an automatic payment on PayPal. So they wanted to support Planet Doug, and they were doing so through my PayPal link. And on PayPal, you can set up an automated payment. So people would be sending Planet Doug $10 a month every month on a schedule. It was automated on PayPal, and these people, now they see that, oh, there's a Patreon, and the Ocean Planet level is set at $10 a month, so they canceled the PayPal automatic payment, and then they joined the Ocean Planet. So they moved their support for Planet Doug from PayPal to Patreon, which obviously makes perfect sense, because that's what Patreon is meant for. And of course, now that they're sending me this financial support on Patreon, they actually get a lot of benefits through Patreon, whereas through PayPal, it's just a direct financial support for me, without anything directly going back to them other than my personal thanks. So yeah, so that was going on. But what I learned was that if somebody joins as a free member, I can't send them a direct message. So if you join the Planet Doug Patreon as a free member and you were expecting a welcome message, I wanted to send you one, but I couldn't because Patreon does not have a mechanism for that. I can send a direct message to people in the tiers, but not free members. So that is one limitation of the free membership. I learned that the chat area is much more sophisticated than I realized, where if someone leaves a message in one of the chat threads, I can click directly on that message and then boom, it opens up a window where I can reply directly to that person and directly to the message that they left. And I love that because it's one thing I still can't do on YouTube. Something I don't really understand why YouTube doesn't have this capability. It used to, where if someone left a comment and then someone replied to that comment, I could click on that reply and reply to the reply, and it would be listed underneath that reply. So you could have conversations within the comment. And when I left a comment, it was clear who I was talking to. But on YouTube, that doesn't happen anymore. So if you get a comment and then a whole bunch of replies, the replies are just a jumble. You have no idea who is talking to who. Somebody might ask a question in a reply. I answer that question, but it just ends up in the long list. They're not connected. And I find that ridiculous that YouTube hasn't figured that out. But on Patreon, they have. So even within a comment with a series of replies, it's quite clear who I'm replying to, which reply I'm replying to. So it has a conversational structure. So I found that to be very, very handy. And in the chat area on Patreon, you can upload photos. So you can just take a picture and then upload it in the chat window. And that's something you can't do on YouTube. And I can understand maybe why YouTube doesn't want to do that, because now you open up a whole can of worms, all of these people posting photographs, and you have to monitor what they're posting because of all of their sensitivity to advertisers and all their guidelines and everything. So if they turn the YouTube comment section into a wide open area where you can post photos and links and all kinds of things, now they have to start policing that and monitoring it and moderating it. And I guess that's just too much, so they just say, no, you can't post photographs. But on Patreon, you can. So that's a very powerful feature that I like a lot. So I learned that about the chat area. Something else I learned on Patreon recently, this is more about being a creator, is that there's no save as draft option. So if I'm writing a post, but I'm not finished yet, I want to be able to save it, go out for lunch, come back, and keep working on it. But I was really disappointed on Patreon that there is no save as draft option. But it turns out it does have that option, but it's automated. So as soon as you open a post and you start adding a picture, a link, you're writing things, it's being saved as a draft constantly in real time. So you don't have to save it as a draft. Patreon saves it as a draft for you automatically, and then you can go to this very powerful feature called the library, and the library has 3 sections: comments, posts, collections, and drafts. So there's a separate area. So you've got a list of all of your posts that you've published, but there's another section of drafts. So every time you create something but you don't publish it, it's automatically saved as a draft. And I was like, that's amazing. So that has helped me out a lot. So I've got like 60 or 70 posts in my drafts column that I've been working on, but I'm not ready to publish them yet. So I find that a very, very powerful feature. Something else I learned, it's very easy to make a post by accident, because when you post something on Patreon, there's two windows. One window, you fill out the content, and then you click on the next button. That takes you to another window where you establish the publishing parameters. But the next button is in the exact same place as the publish button. So if you're not careful, you click next, it goes over to the publish button, and if you're holding like your mouse button down for too long, you get a double click, boom, boom. You get next publish. You're not intending to, but you accidentally publish a post before it's ready, before you've edited it, before you've proofread it, before you've set up the publishing parameters. And I did that quite a few times by accident. So if you are a member of the Planet Doug Patreon, you might have gotten an email notification saying, oh, here's a new post. And you can actually see it in the email, but it was completely by accident, and I didn't intend to send it out yet because I wasn't done with it. So that was quite embarrassing. But now I'm trying to be very careful. I think my mouse is broken, where if I try to click once, it sticks, and I end up getting 2 clicks. Like I try to click, and then it gets stuck, and it's going clicking, clicking. So it's very, very dangerous. I think I might have to get a new mouse. And that's because I end up putting this mouse into my backpack, and it ends up getting squished, and it's pushing down on the buttons while it's stuffed into my backpack. I think I have to figure out a new way to pack the mouse. But anyway, it's very easy to accidentally post something before it's ready. Something else I figured out is that on Patreon, you can have a pinned post at the top. So you've got your home feed, the feed of all the posts, and what I wanted to do was post something and pin it to the top. So for example, the Ask Me Anything post, and I have it pinned to the top. But then a friend of mine and Planet Doug supporter, KY, he suggested, hey, can you, on Patreon, can you keep us updated, like basic facts, like when is your visa going to expire in that country? How many Patreon members are there? Just basically a summary of what's going on right now. And I thought, oh, you know, I like that idea. That's a good idea, because it can be quite frustrating to be following a YouTuber, but you have no idea where they are right now, because they're posting videos, but their videos could be 1 week old, they could be a month old, they could be 6 months old. So they're posting videos from Pakistan, but in reality, they're back in California because their trip is over and they went home. So you get confused about what's going on with these people. But on Patreon, a cool thing about Patreon is that it is in real time. So KY's suggestion about having a post just summarizing, where am I right now? How long is my tourist visa? When does the visa expire? Where are you going to go next? How many people have joined Patreon? Just a summary window. And I thought, yeah, a good idea. So I thought I could create 2 pinned posts. One is the Ask Me Anything post, and then right underneath it, the summary post. And the funny thing is, I wanted to figure out, can I have 2 pinned posts? So I went onto the internet and I asked that question. I think I used ChatGPT as well. Can I have 2, or can I have multiple pinned posts on Patreon? And I got this beautiful, all these replies that said, yes, you can have many pinned posts on Patreon. This is how you do it, and this is how you do it. Gave me instructions. And I went, oh, great. So I went into my Patreon, but I can't do it. If I make a pinned post, it says, okay, this is going to replace your pinned post. So it turns out you can only have one pinned post on Patreon. And yet when I went looking for instructions, even from Patreon, all the instructions said, okay, yes, you can have 2, 3, you can have multiple pinned posts. But that's a funny thing about the internet. The internet never deletes anything. So if somebody posts an article on the internet, how to make pinned posts on Patreon, they might have done it 5 years ago. And at that time, you could have multiple pinned posts. But then Patreon changed it. You can't do it anymore. Right now, you can only have one pinned post. And yet the internet doesn't delete old stuff, right? So you have to be very careful about what you're looking at on the internet. It can be giving you instructions from 5 years ago, but those instructions aren't relevant anymore. And even internet companies like Patreon, like YouTube, like Google, WordPress, all of these big online entities, they change their systems all the time. They're constantly rearranging their menu systems, their UI, but they don't update their guidelines. So quite often their guidelines, their help documents are outdated. They're telling you, oh, if you want to do this, click on the 3 dots, go to this menu, click on that menu, go down here, click on this, and now here you will find the settings. You follow those instructions and they don't work anymore because they've moved everything around and the guidelines aren't up to date. So that's it's a fascinating thing when you think about the internet. You go looking for information, but you're looking back in time and the information just isn't current anymore. So anyway, it turns out you can only have one pinned post. So what I did is I combined them. So now I have one pinned post on Patreon and it has AMA at the top. Like I'm telling people, if you want to ask me a question for the monthly Ask Me Anything video, leave it here as a comment. And then underneath that, I have the Planet Doug summary, where I say, I'm in Indonesia, I'm in Tanjung Balai, my visa is expiring in 2 weeks. When my visa expires at Chinese New Year, I'll probably be returning to Malaysia if they will let me back into the country, etc., etc. So I had to take 2 things and put them into the same pinned post. So that's something else that I learned. Something else I learned, I need a quick drink of water. Is that Patreon has an automated survey. They have 2 surveys. Apparently when somebody joins your Patreon, Patreon gives them an optional survey to fill out. Asks them, like, you joined this Patreon, what are you interested in? Why did you join? What are the benefits that you want with this particular creator? And asks them a bunch of questions. And then I can see their answers and it gives me feedback about the Planet Doug Patreon. So, and it gives it to Patreon as well. So the welcome survey is very interesting, and they have an exit survey. So when somebody leaves a Patreon page, they get presented with a survey. I think it only happens when you join a paid tier, because I've joined Patreons as a free member, and then I've canceled my free membership, but I wasn't presented with an exit survey. So I think it only gets presented to people who signed up for a paid tier. But I really like that a lot. I also learned that replying to comments on Patreon is very, very simple as well. So that I can go to the notifications window, and in notifications, there's a list of all the activity on my Patreon. If you like a post, it tells me. If you commented, It tells me everything that a public activity on the Patreon, I get it in a list of notifications, and then I can click on these notifications and interact with people. So if you leave a comment on a post, I don't have to go to that post to reply to it. I can do it directly from the notifications window. So everything is pulled into one convenient spot, and I can skim through, I can scan through everything. And if you left a comment, I can click on that, and right inside notifications, I can reply to your comment, close it, go on to the next one. And that's a very powerful, very handy feature as well. And I learned that when I post something, a new post on Patreon, I can decide whether you get an email notification or not. Unfortunately, I haven't found a default setting, because I would like my default to be no, you don't get an email notification. Because the way I live, the way my brain works, I could post 10 things per day. Because if I watch a YouTube video and I think, oh, that was kind of cool, that was interesting, boom, I pop it into Patreon and say, as a link, oh, here's a video I just watched. I think it's kind of interesting, and I'll post it on Patreon. Or like anything, an internet article, a company releases a new drone or a new microphone, or Indonesia announces a change to their tourist visa policy. All these things spinning around my head, I could jump onto Patreon and just upload things. Little things, nothing big, nothing major. So I don't want to bombard people with emails all day long. They don't want to get 10 emails from Planet Doug every day. So I want my default to be no, don't send out an email notification. Yes, on Patreon, everybody should get a Patreon notification, but not an email. But I think the default is yes. So for every single post, I have to remember, before I hit publish, I have to scroll all the way down to the bottom and turn email notification off. It's a toggle button. So for every post, I have to remember to turn it on or off. So I want my default to be off. And then if I post a new video, like a Planet Doug bonus video, yes, then I want people to be notified, and then I will turn email notifications on. But right now, Patreon is the reverse. At least I haven't found the setting where I can turn it off. And I'm also a little bit confused, because when I post something and I say, yes, send an email notification, sometimes it gives me another choice where I can say, include the entire post in the email, or only include a preview. And I like that as well, because if I write a 5,000 word Patreon post, I don't want that entire post in your email box. Why would you want this giant essay in your email? I want it on Patreon, but I only want to send a summary, a preview. But sometimes I'm given that option, sometimes I'm not. And I can't figure out why. And there's no setting for me to choose which happens. Anyway, I'm still trying to figure that one out. And though that's what I talked about on my Patreon post. The other thing I've noticed, I was just watching a brand new Paddy Doyle video this morning, and I'll be talking about that in YouTube stories in a minute. But Paddy Doyle, he has a Patreon. And I used to be a free member of his Patreon, but I left it for some reason. But anyway, I decided to go look at his Patreon, and I joined it again as a free member. But his Patreon is so much better than mine. And I remember noticing that in the past. He has a display way nicer than my display. And I don't know how he gets that. Like, why does he have that capability and I don't? So for example, on his, Like on my Patreon, all I have is, you go to my homepage, it shows a feed, a long feed of posts, and then a menu, and that's it. But Paddy Doyle, he has a really nice display where he has at the very top, he has his most popular posts, 3 of them side by side with a thumbnail. So these are popular posts. No, latest. The very first thing is latest post, then popular posts, then trending posts. It has all these categories. And then you can click on go to the home page, and then you see the feed of all posts. But how does he get that? I don't get it. And I've looked and I've looked and I've looked, and I can't find anything on Patreon where I can have a layout like that. So I'm thinking maybe I think he has a Patreon premium account. I'm guessing. I'm gonna have to do some research into that. I haven't gone that far yet. And then, I don't really understand all the settings in Patreon for that. They have kind of a legacy account. Like if you joined up on if you created a Patreon page 5 years ago, you had certain settings. And then Patreon changed all the settings. But because you signed up 5 years ago, you still have the benefit of the original settings. So for example, Patreon gets a cut of everything. So Patreon members, say you joined the Ocean Planet for $10 a month, unfortunately, I don't get all of the $10. I wish I did, but of course, Patreon gets a cut of that money. And based on your account, I don't know what word they use, plan, maybe your Patreon plan, the amount that Patreon gets, the percentage goes up and down. So I think if you are a legacy member from long ago, Patreon takes 5%. I think my plan, which is the standard default plan, I think they call that the Pro plan, it's 8%. So Patreon takes 8% of the money that you are paying. They take 8%. But I think if you jump up to the premium plan, then they take 15%. I think. Don't quote me on that because I haven't done hard research into this yet. And maybe Paddy Doyle signed up for the premium plan and then he gets those options. I think. But I'm going to have to look into that because I really like the way his Patreon works. It's much more sophisticated than mine, and I'm very, very jealous. But at the same time, I don't want to subject Planet Doug Patreon members to giving more money to Patreon. They haven't signed up to the Patreon to support Patreon. They signed up to support me. So I don't want to make them give more money to Patreon. Did you see what I mean? So anyway, I'll look into that and see whether maybe I'm just missing something. Maybe I can design my Patreon a new way and I just haven't found the button I'm supposed to click on yet. But yeah, I'm very jealous of Paddy Doyle. When I looked at his Patreon, he has 220 members. And I think, give me a second here, I better scan down to get this straight. I think I made a note. Okay, he has 220 members, 50 are paid members, but it doesn't say what level because he has different tiers, like $3 a month, $5 a month, $100 a month. It doesn't specify how many members at each tier, but he has 220 members, 50 paid members, and I think he has like over 400 posts. But something else I noticed about his Patreon, and almost everybody else's Patreon, as a free member, you get almost nothing. He doesn't post anything for free members. And my vision for the Planet Doug Patreon is to have a lot of content for free members, because I want the Planet Doug Patreon to be a bit of a Planet Doug community. I think most Patreons, the free members, get nothing. All they get is an email telling them to join. Like, it sends them a post and says, well, this post is locked. The only way you can see this post is to join. You have to unlock it and join a paid tier. But my vision for Planet Doug is to offer quite a bit to free members. So for all the things I just talked about, where I post random thoughts about a YouTube video, about a new microphone, a current affairs story, anything almost like social media, like anything I might post to Facebook or WhatsApp or Instagram, all of that stuff that I'm now putting on Patreon, I can choose who gets to access to these posts. And I want to have a lot of those posts available to free members, so that when they go to the Planet Doug Patreon, there's something for them to look at. They can scroll through the feed, and there's all these photos and links and articles and writing, things like that, that they have access to. And then when you get to the paid tier, like the Forest Planet, then the City Planet, etc., then those members have bigger benefits. The bonus videos, this podcast, early access to all of that content, things like that. So I plan on spreading things out so that the free members get included and they don't feel left out. But again, on Paddy Doyle, I'm a free member, but when I go to his Patreon feed, there's nothing for me. I could scroll and scroll and scroll, and all I see is blurred images and an unlock button. That's all I see. And I want the Planet Doug Patreon to be different from that. Anyway, that is my idea. So that is what is going on with the Planet Doug Patreon. Lots of exciting things going on. I'm back. I just took a short break to make a cup of coffee and to switch over my GoPro from battery power to USB-C power. I forgot about that. I had a battery in the GoPro and I just started recording. But if I'm recording here for like 40 minutes continuously, recording 4K with the battery power, it might overheat. And even if it doesn't overheat, the GoPro gets very, very hot, and that can damage the battery. It can start expanding, and who knows. So anyway, doing something like this podcast, it's much, much better to plug in USB-C power, and that is what I have done. And I also looked up briefly, and I didn't do a deep dive or anything, but a little bit of information about this whole Patreon plan idea, why Paddy Doyle has such a beautiful layout and I don't. It could be because I think there's a beta product out there. I think he manages to do that through something called Product Showcase, which I think is part of the new Patreon shop. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So I think that's where it's coming from, but I don't know whether I have access to this beta product or not. I'm going to look into that, because I'm pretty sure he doesn't have the premium plan. I thought maybe he got this new layout because he has the upper premium plan, but based on what I read, the premium plan is really premium. So the percentage that Patreon takes goes from 8% to 12%. I thought it was higher than that actually, so 12%. But in order to qualify to get that plan, you have to have a Patreon income, a minimum of $5,000 per month flowing through Patreon. I guess that's the only way it makes financial sense to Patreon to offer the premium plan, because 12% of $5,000 that gives them enough money to, I guess with the premium plan, it's really professional, and you actually get a team of people like support staff at Patreon helping you, selling merchandise and doing all kinds of other things. So it costs them a lot of money to offer the premium plan. So I'm pretty sure with 50 paid members, Paddy is not making $5,000 a month off of Patreon. So he wouldn't qualify for the premium plan anyway. So he must be getting this layout option maybe from the product showcase, which, as I said, is part of the shop. Just a little pause for a sip of coffee. And the shop, the last time I was doing any recording, podcast, or the launch video, I hadn't opened my shop yet because I didn't know anything about it. This is a really interesting story, actually, where I investigated the shop, but the only way to turn the shop on was to have something for sale. So you can't open the shop and have empty shelves. There has to be something there that somebody can buy. And of course, the only things I have are posts and journal entries. So what I did, just as an experiment, I tracked down some journal entries I kept. This was long ago, back in 2001. I was living in Ecuador at the time. I was living in Quito for 6 months. I went there with the idea of living there and then getting work as an English teacher, and I found a very inexpensive place to stay. I was living in a hotel. Well, I wouldn't even call it a hotel. It's like a backpacker hostel, and I was paying $1 per night for my room. And so, yeah, $30 a month for my room there. And it was easily maybe the best room I've ever stayed in. It was such an amazing place to stay because it was in old Quito, traditional, with all the Spanish cathedrals and the plazas and all the life of old Quito. And my room was the corner room on the rooftop of an old building that looked out over one of the traditional Spanish plazas. And the plaza was just filled with life every day, especially on the weekend. Musical performances, people buying, selling, people out for a stroll. It was just an amazing place to live. I had this corner room with a huge corner window, and I could open the entire window and sit on the ledge with my feet dangling outside the building and just watch everything going on the streets below me and in the plaza and everywhere. It was an amazing place to live. But anyway, so I was staying there in Quito, and I got this idea. I'd done it before, so it wasn't a brand new idea, but I went to visit the local prison because there was an organization at that time where you could get a list of Western prisoners. Like I could look for any Canadians or Americans who were being held in a prison in countries like Ecuador or Peru or the Philippines or anywhere else. And I developed this habit of going to these prisons and then bringing a care package to give to any of these prisoners there. So I did that in Quito, and I wrote a long journal entry about it. And so what I did is I took all of my journal entries from that prison visit experience. There were like 8 journal entries in total, and I put them together into one collection. And what I wanted to do was take that collection and say people can buy it as a book. Basically, it's an ebook on Patreon, and I put it in the shop and I made it for sale. I think I said $5 or something like that. Anyway, I wasn't really doing it seriously, but I needed something in the shop to sell before I could turn the shop on. And this is going to get very, very technical. But it's an interesting story because it illustrates so much about the modern world of the internet. So when I did this, it was illogical. The logic didn't work out for me. And you got to stick with me here that on Patreon, you make a collection and then you can say, you have to pay $3 to get access to this collection. Okay, that's fine. That's very simple. I understand that. But then you have to take posts, Patreon posts, and put them into the collection. But every post, you also have to say who has access to it, right? So you have no choice in the matter. For every post, I have to say, okay, this post, people in the forest planet have access. People in the ocean planet have access. You have no choice. You have to do that. So now I'm taking a post, I'm putting it into a collection, and I'm saying you have to buy it. And yet people in my Patreon have access to it for free because it is a benefit to their tier. You see what I mean? There's a contradiction there. I'm trying to sell something, and yet people can just get it for free anyway. So it just didn't make any sense to me. Though with the post, you can also sell a post. So I could put a post on Patreon and say, okay, you have to buy it. And I can put a price tag on it. So I can say, you can buy this post. There's a minimum price of $3. That's the minimum. So I can say, okay, this post is available for $3. So I could do that, but now I'm charging 2 times. People have to pay $5 for the collection, but then the post is still going to be locked because I've said you have to buy the post for $3. So then if I put 10 posts in the collection, now you're looking at $30 to buy every post individually, and then $5 for the collection. So now I'm saying to people, you got to pay $35 to read my journal entry from 2001, which makes no sense at all. Anyway, I spent so much time on this. I went around and around and around and around, experimenting. I tried this, I tried that, put it in the shop. No, that doesn't work. Do this. I tried every possible combination of settings, and none of it made sense to me. No matter how much research I did, how much experimenting I did, I could not figure it out. This is so weird. But I run into this all the time on the internet. So finally, I didn't have a choice. I had to contact Patreon and ask them, how do you do this? But my assumption was they weren't going to be able to tell me that, like, even explaining my problem is really hard to do, because even what I just told you in this story, I'm sure you didn't understand it at all. You have to be a Patreon creator to even follow what I'm talking about. You know, collections, posts, access, purchasing price. It's very, very complicated. And I have to explain it in my question to Patreon. And I try to lay it out very, very logically. This is what I want to do, but your system doesn't allow me to do it. I want to put something in the shop for sale as part of a collection, and that's it. And yet the post, I also have to put a price on it. So how does that work? The analogy that I came up with when I'm talking about this, it's like buying a dozen eggs. Like, the dozen eggs goes in a carton that holds the eggs. So you're in a grocery store and they say, a carton of eggs, $5, and you get 12 eggs in the carton. But the way Patreon works, every time you put an egg in the carton, you have to charge $3 for it. So you're telling people, here's a carton of eggs for $5, but you have to pay $36 for the eggs inside the carton. So it's just like completely illogical. It made no sense at all. And there was nothing I could do to fix this problem. So I wrote my message to Patreon and I thought, this is going to be a waste of time. There's no way they're going to understand my question, and they're just going to tell me, oh, just go to this help document. To choose a price for a collection, just click here. Well, I was like, I already know that. That's obvious. And I hate doing that. Like, when I ask somebody a technical question, they always give me the answer that I already know, the basic thing. So it makes me, they must think I'm an idiot. And they say, oh, it's easy to sell a collection. You just say right here, you click on $5. I'm like, well, yeah, obviously I know that. I'm not a moron. I'm not a total idiot. That I know. But if you make the collection for $5 and the egg, you know, the post has to be $3, now you're double charging. And there's no, you know, I'm trying to explain this, but usually the person I'm talking to doesn't even understand the system as well as I understand it, because I've spent an entire day and then an entire second day doing nothing but researching this one topic and experimenting and experimenting. So by the time I ask a question, I know what I'm talking about. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. But then I get all these answers from people that they're like, they give me such obvious answers. They didn't even read my question, and they didn't even understand what I'm talking about. They're actually dumber than I am when it comes to Patreon. So this time, yeah, I sent out my question, and I was just sort of thinking, this is going to be so annoying. They're not going to tell me anything. This is going to be a waste of time. But I got an answer from Patreon. They understood my question, and they had a solution for me. But the solution is utter insanity. It's crazy. So it was amazing that they told me what to do, but the way you fix this problem is like a weird hack, a workaround. And even if I tried to fix this problem for 20 years, I never would have figured this out on my own. So the way you do it on Patreon, in order to do this, because as I said, every post has to be assigned to a tier. You have to specify who has access to it. And there's no way around that. That's just the way the program works. So what Patreon told me is what you do is you create a hidden tier that nobody can join. Like you have to put the post into a tier, but what you do is you create a new tier, publish it, you make it a real tier that people can join, but before anybody joins, you unpublish it. Now you've created the tier, you made it public, and now you unpublish it, and because it's unpublished, nobody can see it. It's still in my Patreon. As a creator, I can see this hidden tier, but nobody else can see it. It's like a placeholder, a fake hidden tier. So now I have 5 tiers in the Planet Doug Patreon. I've got the Forest Planet, City Planet, Ocean Planet, Mountain Planet, and then I have one more, a fake tier that I called it Shop Placeholder, because that's what it is. It's a hidden placeholder tier that you can't see, only I can see it. You can't join this tier. So now when I created my collection, all the posts that I put into that collection, I assigned it to the hidden tier because I have to. But nobody can join the tier. So now when you say $5 to buy this collection, whoever buys that collection, it unlocks all of the posts in that collection for them, but nobody else has access to it because nobody can join the tier because it's hidden. It's like, it's so crazy. I mean, it's an ingenious solution, but what it is a hack. It's a workaround. So there's clearly a problem in their system. It doesn't make any sense at all, but they did offer this workaround, this hack to get around this logical problem. But that was such an amazing experience for me to send my question to Patreon, and they understood my question and they gave me a useful reply. I couldn't believe it. And anyway, so then I did it. I actually created that collection. So if you go to my Patreon, you go to the shop, you will see keto prison visit. It's a collection of 8 posts, and I have a price on it of $5. So nobody can see any of those posts until they pay the $5. No one from any tier can see it because only the members of the shop holder or the shop placeholder tier, they also have access to it, but nobody can join it because I unpublished it. It's just, it's like, you know, your brain just goes nuts with this stuff. Anyway, I plan on doing that. So I do have the collection on Patreon, the time capsule. And I believe access to, like early access to the time capsule is part of the Forest Planet tier, I believe. And then all the tiers above it. So all members have access to the time capsule. But my plan is to keep putting posts into the time capsule, but into the time capsule I'm going to be putting shorter posts, like maybe 1 post. Maybe I go back into my journal from Taiwan when I'm living there, and I went to a beautiful temple and I took pictures of the temple and I wrote a little story about that one temple. That is a time capsule post. But if I go to Cambodia, which I did do on a bicycle trip, and I kept a journal, and that journal is like 300 pages long, or it's a book, basically. It's an e-book. I'm going to take my Cambodia journal, package it, put it onto the fake tier, put it all into the Cambodia bicycle trip collection, and I'm going to put it in the shop. So if somebody wants to buy my ebook about my trip to Cambodia, they can buy it at whatever price I settle on. I have no idea what is a reasonable amount to ask. So, I mean, I've got trip journals from Cambodia, from the Philippines, from Guinea, from Ethiopia, from all these different countries I've been to. And I plan on putting them together as Patreon ebooks and putting them in the shop. So that's another part of Patreon that I'm working on. And speaking of Paddy Doyle, he is my first YouTube story today because he just began a brand new journey. So his very first video is called Riding 800 Kilometers to Chiang Mai's Majestic Mountains. So he's in Thailand. I don't really know his personal situation. I really wish I did, because my understanding is that he was in Thailand as an English teacher. So his visa is a work visa for working at this school in Thailand. But then he quit that job to become a full-time YouTuber and is very, very successful at it. So his entire lifestyle, zooming all around the world, is all being funded by his YouTube channel and merchandise and guidebooks that he's selling. He's very, very good at what he does from that point of view. He runs his YouTube channel as a very profitable business, as opposed to the Planet Doug approach. But I don't know how he stays in Thailand. Like, he has a condo. In this video, it begins with him on his scooter. Again, he has a Honda CT 125. I love those scooters. They would be really nice, I think, to travel around on. They have more like a motorcycle handlebar with bars, exposed bars. So it's much easier to mount cameras and accessories and things. And it has a nice rack on the back where you can just attach things. And while I was watching this video, I was watching intently, looking at all the gear, because I'm such a gearhead. I want to see exactly, okay, what cameras is he using? What microphones is he using? What mounting systems is he using? And then what gear like he has. So he has a big dry box that he puts all of his expensive camera gear in, like the drone. I think he has a really expensive Sony full frame mirrorless camera with nice lenses. All of his important electronics goes into this black case with a lock on it, and it attaches to the back rack. And then he has a small deuter backpack that he wears as he's riding his scooter. And normally that would be really uncomfortable. I've done it in the past where you try to wear a backpack while you're riding a scooter or a bicycle. It's just agony, it's just uncomfortable, it's horrible. But if you have a case, like his hard shell case, a square box on the back, and then there's a space between him and the case, now his backpack is resting on the seat and leaning against the case. So he can actually, it's like being in an easy, a lounge chair, and he can just sort of lean back, and he's got a backrest. I did that once before myself when I was living in Taiwan. I had the same sort of setup, and it's so nice. You got that backrest, and you just go all day long. So he has a really nice rig. But the first thing I notice, of course, is how small everything is. Very small backpack, and then one box for his gear. And that's it. And I'm like, oh, that would be so nice to have such a simple lifestyle. But the reason he can do that, or one of the reasons he can do that, is he has a home. He has a home base. He has a condo in Bangkok. So all of his personal possessions, all of his extra stuff, he just leaves it all behind in the apartment, and he packs only what he needs for this one trip. And maybe the trip is going to be 2 weeks long. I don't know. His plan is to go to Chiang Mai, and then he has like a loop organized to ride around northern Thailand. And then he's just gonna, he starts in Chiang Mai, does a loop, ends in Chiang Mai, and then rides right back to Bangkok and goes back to his condo. And then when he arrived at one hotel in this video, he did point out, oh, you get a towel here. And I'm very happy about that. And he was talking about sleeping in a tent, but he said, nah, I couldn't really do that because it would be hot and uncomfortable, like a tent that they provided. And he said, they don't even give you a towel. And he said, yeah, I don't travel with a towel, so I have to stay in a hotel room because they provide a towel. So that also gives me a clue that he doesn't pack as much stuff as I do, because obviously I have to bring my own towels because the places I stay in often don't even provide a towel, things like that. But so his minimalist gear comes from the fact that he has enough money to stay in hotels, nice hotels, every single night, and he has a house, a condo, and he keeps all of his stuff. Like me right now, like I don't have a home anywhere, so in my bags I even carry around my university diploma. I have it with me because, like, all of my Canadian ID, because I have nowhere else to keep anything. So if I decide to go to Taiwan and look for a job as an English teacher or something like that, well, I need my resume and I need my university diploma. I need university transcripts. I need reference letters. I need all this stuff. I have to go around the world and bring all this stuff with me. So I have all that with me all the time. But Paddy Doyle, he can just keep it all in his condo. And he has a shipping address. He has a home address. So it's just a lot easier to live like that. But it does raise the question, well, how can he live in Thailand for year after year after year? What visa does he have? He doesn't talk about any of that behind the scenes stuff. So I don't know what's going on with that. He quit his job, so he doesn't have a work visa anymore. Did he get like some kind of digital nomad visa? He would qualify for one of those because he makes enough money from YouTube that he would meet the income requirements. So who knows what he's doing. But anyway, I said I was trying to figure out the gear that he was using, but I wasn't able to do it because he never showed any of it. It was really weird. I have to be like Sherlock Holmes. There's a really weird sequence in his video where he's riding the scooter and he switches back and forth between a camera that's facing forward, shows the road ahead of him, and another camera pointing at him. And he's speaking and the view goes back and forth. But it doesn't make any sense because when the camera is pointing forward, there isn't any other camera in the field of view. So he has a camera filming him from the front, but where is it? Because it's not there. Like normally, like if you're filming with two cameras, you got one here, one on the handlebars, and when you see the video from this camera, you can see the other camera. It's on the handlebars or on a stick. It's up there in the air pointing backwards. But when he switches to this camera pointing forward, there's no camera anywhere. And then when he switches to the one in the front pointing backwards, there's no camera there either. I don't know how he does it. It's like a magic trick. He's got no chest harness. He's got no helmet mount. So when the camera is pointing forward, where is it mounted? I don't know. It's a real mystery. And I thought, well, maybe what he's doing is he records everything with one camera when he's speaking, like the one that's aiming at him, because you see his mouth moving. So the audio is being recorded on that camera. But then while he's riding, then he takes that camera, disconnects it, mounts it here, and then shoots B-roll where he's not speaking. And then he takes that B-roll and adds it to the audio from the A-roll. That's the only way he could be doing it. So I thought, so when you look at the two video points of view, they're going to be different because they're going to be from two different streets. But then I went back and I watched it carefully, and it's the same street. It's the exact same video. I looked so carefully at this point where he was going up to a corner, and then he approaches the corner using this camera pointing forward, and you can see exactly what the intersection looks like. And as he's going around the corner, it switches to the camera facing him, and it's the exact same intersection, the exact same street. And yet there's only one camera. How did he do that? The only answer is he did it twice. And that may seem ridiculous, but he must have. So I think he had a camera at the front of his motorcycle filming him, and then when he speaks, he's telling the story, like he's narrating, or he does voiceover, a lot of voiceover as well, after the video has been shot. So he must ride up to the intersection, go around the corner, stop, take the camera, move it from the front to here or from here to the front, turn around, go all the way back, and film it a second time with the other perspective. There's no other way to do it unless he has an invisible camera, honestly. So yeah, I have no idea how he does it. And I don't even know what cameras he's using. Like normally I can figure out what camera a YouTuber is using because you see the other camera. He's filming with one camera, the other camera is in the video. It's like, oh, that's a DJI Action 4. Oh, that's a GoPro Hero 12. I recognize all these cameras. You see the microphones, you see the cameras, but in his video, you never see any of them. So I'm really confused. One time in the mirror, I could see in his scooter mirror, I saw one of the cameras, and it was a 360 camera. And the 360 camera was in the mirror. So it's possible he was doing all of this with a 360 camera because a 360 can point in two different directions at the same time. But that doesn't make any sense because one of the cameras was on his chest pointing forward. It's not like if he has a camera on his chest, it can't film from 5 feet ahead of him pointing backwards. They can only point forward because it's on his chest mount. So anyway, and it looks too good. A 360 camera, it wouldn't look as good as that video does. So anyway, I can't tell you what cameras he's using. I know he has a 360 camera. I know he has a big, fancy Sony full-frame mirrorless. He uses that when he parks his scooter, and then he's like at a lookout point, and he's just filming himself and filming the scenery. He's like B-roll kind of stuff. And he has a drone. He has a really nice drone, so you get some beautiful drone shots. But his action camera setup and his microphones, I have no idea what he's doing. No clue. The video itself, he did a lot of filming himself from a distance. Like the whole video, it covers a 3-day period. For the entire 3 days, he was constantly taking the camera, the mystery camera, and he puts it on a tripod somewhere. So like when he got on the scooter in his condo parking garage, he put the camera somewhere, then turned around, walked all the way back, and then pretended to do it for the first time. And then he walked to his motorcycle, mounted all his bags, and then he talked into the camera, and then he mounted the camera again. He filmed himself driving out of the garage, but then of course he had to turn around, come all the way back in, get his camera, put it on the scooter. And he did that the entire 3 days. So when he moved into a hotel, he would actually drive to the hotel, park his scooter, get his camera, mount it in front of his room, get back on the scooter, drive away, and then pretend to ride up to the hotel for the first time. Film himself arriving, getting off the bag, taking off his helmet, going into his room. Then he puts the camera inside his hotel room. I don't know if he ever did that. He probably did. And then he goes back outside, closes the door, and then goes into the room. So he did that over and over and over throughout the entire 3 days. So that was a lot of work, and I appreciate the amount of work that goes into it, and I appreciate the professionalism. It looks good. It's very smooth, very much like a professionally shot travel video. So those are all positive things. But in the end, I don't really like that kind of video. I'm also watching the videos from Marc Travels. He's the German guy using the electric motorcycle, and he has a much simpler setup. He's using 2 Insta360 Go cameras, these tiny, tiny ones. He has one on his helmet chin, one on his motorbike mirror, and that's it. And he's not doing any voiceover narration. He's not filming himself. He's not mounting a camera and then staging arrivals and departures. He doesn't do any of that stuff. But I enjoy his videos more because what I want to get out of a travel video is a sense of being there in real time. I like the feeling of experiencing it while he's doing it. It's rougher, it's more raw, it's more edgy for me. So I like that. And I appreciate the Paddy Doyle approach, very professional. He has a sponsor. It's sponsored by Squarespace, of course. And he's got a little advertisement in the middle about Squarespace. And his video description, it looks like it was written by a marketing team. It's so beautifully written and beautifully laid out. And he has all his merchandise. I mean, everything is so professionally done. And the music underlaying everything was a little bit weird, I thought. Some weird music choices. But again, I appreciate, as I said, the work that goes into it and mounting that camera and keeping the cameras hidden all of that time. It's a lot of work. He put a lot of effort into that, which I appreciate. And I was surprised that the video was somewhat sedate. And to be honest, I liked it. In the past, whenever he embarked on a new trip, what he would do, of course, is travel for several days, shooting video, and he's trying to get the most dramatic, the most exciting, the best video he can. And then after maybe 2 weeks or something, then he creates a trailer for the series. And then he makes the trailer as amazing and dramatic and exciting as possible. So when he's filming, he makes sure to ride his scooter through some beautiful scenery, and then he takes all of those moments and edits them together to make like a 30-second introduction to the series, you know, next level adventures. So that's what he normally does. For this series, he didn't do any of that. It's a very sedate, very quiet, very low-key sort of introduction. It's all very professionally done. But to me, I liked it a lot better. It's much more laid back, much more casual, which I kind of enjoyed. And then he spent the night at the national park. That was after day 2. And then day 3, he rode the rest of the way to Changdao. And the whole idea is to base himself in Changdao and then go in a loop. So I'm looking forward to his videos because that's a gorgeous area, really beautiful. I went up to Changdao and I didn't have the time or the opportunity to really travel around that whole area. I kind of based myself in Changdao alone because, again, the Planet Doug style, I have to see everything in Changdao first, because they had caves, they had temples, they had museums, and interesting neighborhoods. So for me, there was more than enough things to explore right in the city itself. So all I did, I rode my scooter to Changdao, stayed for a few nights, and then left Changdao. I never did a loop through the countryside, but that's what he's going to do. He's going to do a loop through the countryside. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the videos that he shoots. The most recent Itchy Boots video is from Iran, and the video is called "They Don't Let Me Leave Iran," Season 8, Episode 26. And it turns out that this is another two-parter because there is a cliffhanger, because as she says in the video title, they won't let her leave. She was in Iraq. That was where her motorcycle was stolen, and then she got it back again, but the thieves cut through the wiring harness and did a lot of other things to her motorbike, so she's still recovering from that. And then she, because of visa problems, she can't go to Baghdad. She has to get a different visa to go to Baghdad in Iraq. So she left Iraq, crossed the border into Iran, spent one night there, I think, and now in this video, she's riding to the border and wants to leave Iran and go back into Iraq. And so the whole video is about a border crossing, basically. And I think maybe a lot of people find those boring, but I find them fascinating because border crossings are fascinating places. They're horrible places. They're like the worst part of any country, really, the border crossing. But they can also be kind of interesting because they're the intersection between two cultures, two economies, two militaries, two governments, two languages. Like border areas can be fascinating. And that's one of the reasons I stayed in Mae Sot in Thailand, because it's a border town between Thailand and Myanmar. And in fact, Mae Sot to me didn't even feel like a city in Thailand, which is one of the reasons I liked it. It felt like you were still in Myanmar because it's right on the border. And so many people from Myanmar live in Mae Sot. They still speak that language. They're from Myanmar, basically. They just happen to live across the border in Thailand. But it still historically feels like a part of Myanmar. Anyway, border areas are a lot of fun. But if you are crossing the border with a motorcycle and you're crossing between two countries like Iran and Iraq, well, things get a little bit complicated, and then they're not so pleasant. Like, so many of these border crossings are huge, particularly when you have a motorbike, because you have to find customs for your motorbike and you have to find immigration for you. You have to go to 2 different places, sometimes 5 different places to get all the papers you need. And then when you go there, you don't know where to go. So when Nora Lee got to this border area, she's on her motorbike, and it's like this vast complex with hundreds of transport trucks lined up, waiting to cross, huge parking areas, buildings, and you don't know where to go. All you could really do is ride up on your motorcycle, stop, look lost, and wait for somebody to start shouting at you and pointing where you're supposed to go, because you just don't know. So it's got to be so stressful. When she crossed from Iraq into Iran, she spent 3.5 hours at the border, just crossing the border. So you can imagine how stressful that was, how tiring that was. And now she's trying to do the reverse, go from Iran back into Iraq, And she had to do the exact same thing, riding around, everyone shouting, go here, no, 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 not here, 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 here. Total confusion. Quick aside here, how come nobody ever tells Nora Lee to use Google Translate? People tell me that all the time, which I always find a little bit amusing, because it's one of those comments I'm like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, I know, okay, I come across as a dummy in my videos. I sort of do that deliberately. But at the same time, I'm not that dumb. I know about Google Translate, and I use it all the time. But in some of my videos from the past, I'll be in like a really busy market, there's crowds around, and the market seller, they're trying to sell me some snacks. And you just can't use Google Translate in that environment because it's too crowded, it's too noisy, they're too busy, and then you can't exactly type something out and, excuse me, here, I want you to read this or listen to it. Just, there's some situations where you can't use Google Translate. So I don't, and we have trouble communicating, and I'll always get a comment from people, they're trying to be helpful, and they say, oh, you should use Google Translate. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know, I know about Google Translate, but in that moment, I couldn't. But Nora Lee on the Itchy Boots channel, she doesn't interact with a whole lot of people, to be honest. She, in her videos, most of the human interaction takes place at gas stations. She's always going to gas stations. Every video has a couple of gas stations in it. She rides up on her motorbike, and all these gas station attendants come out, and they start talking to her in their local language. You know, where are you going? Where are you from? And how long have you been here? And how much did you pay for the motorcycle? How old are you? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you married? All the questions that they always ask. They're asking her all these questions in their language, and Nora Lee can't understand what any of them are saying, and she just kind of guesses, and then you can see her looking at them, and then she'll point on her GPS tablet if it's working, because hers is broken right now. And then she assumes they're asking, where is she going? And then say, oh, I'm going here, and she speaks in English to them. So I'm expecting in the comments that 100 people are going to tell her, oh, have you heard about Google Translate? You should use Google Translate. Because she's always in these situations where people speak to her in their language, she replies in English, but she never uses Google Translate as far as I can tell. And nobody ever tells her about it. It's like everybody tells me all the time. I get a lot of helpful suggestions, people telling me, but yeah, when it comes to Google Translate, nobody ever tells Nora Lee that she should use Google Translate. And when she goes to the border crossings, it's the same. I'm actually surprised that we don't see her on video using Google Translate, because border crossings are difficult, and all these men are telling her things, and the things they're telling her have got to be very important. So I kind of start expecting her to get out her phone and just like start speaking in, translating it, and communicating. And maybe she does it all the time, but maybe she just, for the same reasons for me, maybe she just doesn't show it on video, because it takes a long time to have a conversation using Google Translate. It works and it's effective, but it's not exactly exciting video content, is it? Anyway. And Paddy Doyle too, I never see him use Google Translate, and nobody tells him that he should. So yeah, I wonder about that. Anyway, so there she is at the border going through all this process, and then she's trying to get her motorcycle papers stamped, and she has what they call a carnet de passage, which is like a customs document that allows her to bring the motorcycle into a country, and then the carnet de passage guarantees that she's going to leave the country and bring the motorcycle with her. That's what the carnet does. And she has her carnet de passage, but then when she tried to present it, I'm spoiling the video here, but it's not exactly a big deal. They looked at her paperwork and they said, you got the wrong stamp, because you get an entry stamp when you come in, and then when you leave the country, you get an exit stamp. And when she crossed the border from Iraq into Iran, when she entered Iran, the officials there, they put an exit stamp. They put in the wrong stamp. It's like, but of course she didn't know. She looked at the stamp, it's all in Iraqi, in Arabic, and she doesn't know what it says. She hands over her documents, they look at it, okay, she pays whatever she has to pay. They stamp it, here you go, and away she goes. She doesn't know what an entry stamp looks like versus an exit stamp. She can't tell. So she just happily went on her way. Now she gets to the border to exit. They're looking for her entry stamp, and they're like, oh no, you got the wrong stamp. And it's almost like they're blaming her. Like, you got the wrong stamp. You got the exit stamp. You were supposed to get an entry stamp. And of course she's trying to explain. It was like, I didn't do anything. It's not my fault. They did it. Like, and I'm sure she was hoping, because they can tell, they can look at her passport. Oh, you entered Iran. You entered Iran. They gave you the wrong stamp. Oh, it was their mistake. Sorry about that. Here you go. Let me fix it for you. And they can cross it out, put in an entry stamp, give her the exit stamp. That would be common sense. That would be logical. That would be helpful. But of course, we're talking about a bureaucracy at a border crossing. And maybe they do that for her. But we don't know yet, because that's where the video ended. And we don't know what happened after that. But so there's a chance that she's going to have to go all the way back to the border where she entered and convince them that, listen, you guys gave me the wrong stamp. Can you fix it? But of course, that's going to be confusing, because now she's driving up to the border looking like she wants to exit, and she's telling them, can you give me an entry stamp? It's going to be total chaos. I feel a lot of sympathy for her. But yeah, something like that can really mix you up. They give you the wrong stamp, but how do you know which stamp you got? But we'll see what happens. And in a very funny twist, she's late with her next video. Like, normally Nora Lee is like clockwork. She posts her videos the exact same day, the exact time. There's a perfect schedule that she follows. And her millions of subscribers, they know about the schedule. They're all sitting at their computer. They know when it, like to the hour, to the minute, and they're like eagerly waiting. And then the latest video is late. I don't think I've ever seen her do that before. So now when I looked at this video, I'm seeing a lot of comments from people saying, are you okay? What's going on? We're waiting for your next video. Why haven't you posted it yet? We hope you're okay. A lot of people are posting concern for her because her latest video is late. I haven't checked her Instagram. Sometimes her Instagram is more up to date than her YouTube video. So maybe but I think her video is like 6 weeks behind. So clearly 6 weeks have passed since this episode at the border, the whole entry stamp, exit stamp fiasco. So it's been 6 weeks since then. So it's pretty, if there was a big problem, I mean, if her motorcycle was stolen again, if she had an accident, if she was arrested, if she was kidnapped, if anything happened like that, I think we'd know about it. So I'm sure she's fine. Her video is just 1 day late, but everybody is panicking already. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I have a related story to that. This is a complete tangent, nothing to do with Nora Lee or Itchy Boots. But I just mentioned that she could have been kidnapped. That reminded me that when I was putting together my Ecuador journal for the Patreon shop, my prison visit journal, I was rereading a lot of my old journal from Ecuador. I have something like, I must have 1,000 pages that I wrote while I was in Ecuador, probably more than that. And I don't have all of it, digitized, unfortunately. I don't have access to all of it, but I've got like maybe 600 pages I have stored in my Google Drive as part of an archive. So I was rereading a lot of my journal entries, and it reminded me of living in 2001 in Ecuador. So we're talking about before smartphones, before Google Maps, before YouTube existed. The internet was relatively new. So it was an entirely different world. And I remember when I was there, living in Quito, I was following travelers who had websites. So they're much more common back then, like travel blogs, because people weren't posting YouTube videos. We didn't have things like Patreon, none of this existed. But there were certain websites that allowed travelers to post simple journals as they were going around the world. And at that time, as I read in my journal, there was a guy who called himself Striking Viking. So Striking Viking, he was trying to ride his motorcycle, like the classic North America down to the tip of South America journey by motorcycle. And so as I said, the guy's name was Striking Viking. He was posting online to a blog, and then I was following his journey. And then one day, he vanished. There were no more posts from him. And at that time, there was something called the Lonely Planet Thorn Tree. The Thorn Tree, I think it still exists, was like a message board for travelers, because Lonely Planet guidebooks were how everybody traveled back in those days. Without Google Maps, everybody had their Lonely Planet guidebook. And on the Thorn Tree, his girlfriend started posting things asking, like, my boyfriend, the Striking Viking, he disappeared. We can't get in touch with him. We think he might be hurt. Does anybody know? And there's all this chatter online, went on for weeks, where everybody, like Striking Viking, just vanished. Nobody knew what happened to him. And everybody was chattering online. I was following the story because I wanted to know. And then there was no answer. I don't think at that time I ever found out what happened to the Striking Viking. But now, when I was reading my Ecuador journal, I went, oh yeah, Striking Viking, what happened to that dude? So I typed Striking Viking motorcycle blogger into Google, and it turns out that he was kidnapped. He was riding his motorcycle. He was kidnapped in Colombia by one of the rebel groups that was fighting the government at that time, the FLARC or something like that, the FLARC. I can't remember which one kidnapped him, but somebody kidnapped him, held him for ransom, and then I don't know how he was released, I don't know the story, but since then, he wrote a book. So now there is a book out there. You can see it on Goodreads. Just type in Striking Viking into Google, and he wrote a book about his experience of being kidnapped in Colombia. So I haven't read the book. I don't have access to it. And it may not be my kind of book. Even his blog posts, he's not my kind of guy. The Striking Viking, a little bit vulgar for the Planet Doug tastes, I suppose. He was one of these guys, and he wasn't exactly compatible with me, I think, as a writer, as a person, the experiences that he seeks out, and a lot of bravado, which I don't like very much. But anyway, so I probably won't buy his book. I probably won't find it interesting. But anyway, I'm going to do some research and find out what happened. Like, he was kidnapped. How was he released? Did somebody pay a ransom, or did they give up on him and say, nobody likes you, nobody's going to pay the ransom, so they just let him go? Or they discovered that he was poor and didn't have any money anyway, or did his embassy intervene and get him released? Who knows? But anyway, the Striking Viking story, that came out of doing my Ecuador journal research. That was kind of interesting. Just a couple other things about the itchy boots video. One thing I've noticed, it's kind of funny, that ever since her motorcycle was stolen and then the thieves cut the wiring harness, so she doesn't have an electric start anymore. She has to kickstart her motorcycle every morning. And in the morning, when the motorcycle is cold, it doesn't start up right away. So, and she knows this, it's just standard, I guess. And she's had to do it a few mornings, so she knows that when she gets on her motorcycle, she has to kickstart it, and it's gonna take a while. So it's like, you know, she's got to do this for quite a while. I don't know exactly how long she has to do it, but she has to do it long enough that all the men start gathering around to watch. Of course, that happens everywhere she goes, especially in a place like Iran or Iraq, where you don't see any women anywhere. There are no women on the streets. All the women are at home. This is something that I picked up on, and it really surprised me when I went to a few countries that were Islamic. And then as you are traveling around that country on your motorcycle or on your bicycle, whatever, and your entire day from beginning to end, all you see are men. The restaurants are filled with men. The cafes are filled with men. Even in Malaysia, I have that experience. I stay in the Little India, the Islamic Little India in KL. That's where my normal hotel is located there. And I would go out to all the restaurants in that neighborhood, all men. And you start wondering after a while, it's like, what the heck? Where are the women? Like even in the restaurants, the cooks are men, the waiters are men, the servers are men, the cashiers are men. Everybody sitting at a table, they're all men. And you start to wonder after a while, like, have I gone into some weird alternate universe? Like, where are the women? And of course, being a traditional Islamic neighborhood, the women tend to be at home. That's just the way the culture operates. So itchy boots, being in a place like Iraq or Iran, being a woman traveling through, the men are like, whoa, because they don't see that as a rule. First of all, they're not going to see women out in public for the most part. They're not going to see a woman riding a motorcycle and then a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Dutch woman on a big motorcycle. Like, wow, that is something unusual in their day. So even when her motorcycle was in perfect condition and she could just start it with the electric start and take off, men are going to gather around to watch her. So she's loading up her bags on the motorbike. Every man in a 100-meter radius is slowly going to drift over and just sort of stand there and ask her questions. Where are you going? Where are you from? Things like that. That happens all the time. But now she's kickstarting her bike. All these men are watching. And of course, all the men see a woman having trouble starting her motorbike. So they just assume, well, it's a woman. She doesn't know how to start a motorbike, and they want to help. So all these men are like giving her suggestions. Oh, what you got to do is do this and do that and do that. All these men start to get involved because it looks like she can't start her motorcycle and needs help. In reality, obviously she knows everything there is to know. She knows how to ride a motorbike, how to start her motorbike, and she knows she has to kickstart it like 20 times before it's going to start. But the men don't know that. So now, I was thinking when I was watching this that Itchy Boots has to be a little bit embarrassed now, that every single morning, all these men are going to look at her like she's a dummy, because she's out there kicking and kicking and kicking and kicking, and her motorcycle won't start. So it looks like she's an amateur now, even though she's not. So I bet she's really looking forward to getting her motorcycle fixed and getting the electric start again, because then she can start it up and get out of there as fast as possible. And in this latest video in the morning, she was trying to start it, and she knew she even had to take a break, I think, from time to time, like kick 3 times, vroom, 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 and then wait. Like, just let the motorcycle sit for like 15 seconds, then do it again, vroom, vroom, 3 times, then wait. She's got this whole routine figured out. But while she was waiting, a man came up and was like, let me do it. You know, can I do it for you? And then Itchy Boots, Nora Lee, she actually got off her motorcycle and said, okay, you go ahead. And then the man, he didn't get on the motorcycle, but he put his foot on the kickstart and he did it a few times, trying to help her out. But anyway, I was just thinking, as I said, that it's got to be so embarrassing or kind of stressful for her now that it takes her so long to get her motorcycle started in the morning, and then all these men gather around. You know, it's like I often think of this Jerry Seinfeld comedy routine, and he has this one bit about how in any neighborhood men are magically drawn to the sound of power tools, construction, mechanical, anything. So any man in the United States, he's working on something in his driveway or in his front yard, and he gets out a drill or something, you know, you hear an engine of any kind, all the men in the neighborhood run to the living room, look out the curtains and say, hey, like talking to their wives, I think Bill is working on something over there. I wonder what he's doing. And all these men like zombies come out of their house and just start walking towards the one man who's busy wrenching on an engine or drilling a hole or hammering. Whatever a man is doing, building something, all the men in the neighborhood just can't help themselves. They've got to go look and see what he's doing. And then they start offering advice. And Itchy Boots finds herself in that situation all the time. So yeah, I find that kind of funny, and yeah, I'm sure Nora Lee is dreaming of the day she gets her electric start working again. And the very last thing I thought about watching her video, I think about this all the time, whenever she goes to a border crossing, there's got to be at least 100 transport trucks lined up. And I've seen it myself, border crossings that I've been to, you just see hundreds. I guess you wouldn't go into the thousands, but probably hundreds of trucks all just sitting there. There's nobody in the cab. And I always wonder, how long is it going to take? Like, what is going on? Like, what kind of paperwork do they have to process? How long does it take? So when a guy drives his transport truck up to the border between Myanmar and Thailand, between Iran, Iraq, between any country, how long do they sit there? Are we talking about hours? Like, does it take 12 hours? Or does it take 12 days? Like, does it take hours or days to get across that border? And in the meantime, what do the drivers do? Are they sleeping in their trucks? Are there cheap hotels? Are there campgrounds? Are they sleeping on the ground under their trucks? That whole culture of transport trucks crossing borders I find really fascinating. Of course, between Canada and the United States, it's highly organized. Everything is electronic now, everything is scanned, and everything is done in advance. You register with customs before you get there, and then they zip, 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 zip. But if you're going from Kenya into Tanzania in Africa or something, what are those border crossings like? And exactly how long are the drivers stuck at the border? And then what do they do while they're stuck? And who is paying for all the food they have to eat while they're waiting? Because they're being paid to drive the truck and carry the load. Like, does the money for their food come out of their salary? Or, yeah, it's a whole world I don't understand. It would be interesting to figure all that out. I mentioned I'm also following another YouTuber, a travel vlogger, a German called Marc Travels. He's the guy that's riding an electric motorcycle, and lately he's been in India and Nepal, having a lot of adventures. I enjoy his videos for the most part. He has like a double burden in terms of shooting videos, in terms of the subject matter. What I mean is, he's riding a motorcycle And I do find that people who travel around the world on a motorcycle, the motorcycle takes center stage. So they don't often tell you very much about the country they're in. They don't really seem to spend a lot of time learning about the country, like the language, the food, the music, the culture, religion, the family structure, the schools, because they spend all day riding down the big roads on motorcycles. And then Nora Lee, of course, and other people, they go down the small roads, but the video is all about riding the motorcycle, and it's hard to find the time or the opportunity to come to grips with the country they're in. So the videos tend to ignore the country in favor of the motorcycle. So Marc Travels is like that because he's riding a big adventure motorcycle, but he's also riding an electric motorcycle. So that's another topic of interest, and he spends the majority of his time looking for chargers. And his videos, 50% of the videos are all about charging the bike, charging the battery. So he's got to find a charging station, look for a hotel, like a fancy hotel that has electric charging, going to the charging station, plugging in. They may or may not have the right plug. Sometimes he finds a charging station, and I guess there are different types of plugs, one for cars, one for motorcycles, or different types of cars. I don't know. But he'll go up to the charging station. It's like, yes, oh, I found one. And he looks at the plug. Oh, I can't use this one. And I guess there's no such thing as an adapter. You can't adapt it to the socket he has. So now he's got to find another one and another one. And eventually he finds one that has the right plug, but now he needs the app, because you need a smartphone app in order to pay for the charging. So now they've got a QR code on the charger, and he scans the code. He's got to log in. He's got to have a payment system, and half the time that doesn't work. So he finds one with the right plug, but now he can't use the app. So now he's got to find one where he has the right plug, he has an app, it has electricity, has internet access, he can sign up and he can pay for it. So it's a lot to deal with. It's not as simple as taking a bottle of gas and pouring it into the engine. There's a lot of technology involved. So because he's riding on an adventure bike and it's an electric bike, that dominates the story. That's the only story he tells. So he's in Nepal right now. It's not like you're going to watch his video and learn about Nepal. It's like, oh, the population of Nepal is this. Oh, this is how they live. This is the food they eat. This is what a Nepalese school looks like. Oh, let's go have a conversation. Like, none of that happens, because all day he's riding the electric bike. And when he's not riding the bike, he's charging the bike. And when he's not doing those two things, he's staying in a nice hotel, editing his videos about charging his motorbike. So you don't really find out a lot about the country that he's in. So from that point of view, the videos are not designed really to appeal to me, but it's a new world to me. Like, I didn't know. I didn't even know it was possible. Oh, you can go to India and charge up an electric motorcycle. If you'd asked me, I would have said, no, you can't go to India on an electric motorcycle. They're not going to have any chargers there. But apparently, countries like Nepal and India, everywhere around the world, quietly in the background, where I'm not aware of it, they're installing more and more and more electric chargers. So if you're willing to do the research, put up with the hassle, you can. You can actually own and operate an electric vehicle, even in remoter districts of Nepal, which is, yeah, it's kind of crazy. I had no idea. So it's kind of a new world for me. So I'm enjoying watching his videos from that point of view. I'm learning a lot about electric motorcycles. It's even a lot of fun. I was just writing to somebody on Patreon about this, that when I watch his videos, it always takes me by surprise how quickly he goes, because I'm used to people on motorcycles, engines, motorcycles with gas engines. They get on the bike and they got to turn on the switch, maybe adjust the clutch, not the clutch, the choke, itchy boots now with her motorbike. It's an older one. She's got to open the choke, and she's got to give it gas, and she's got to hit the starter, and you know, it takes a while. And then they got to engage the clutch, and then they put it in gear and release the clutch, and away they go. Marc from Marc Travels, his motorbike is sitting there at the side of the road because he stopped to take a picture or something, or talk to someone or get some food. And then he walks over to his motorbike, hops on, shoom. Like, he doesn't have to do anything because it's an electric motor. He doesn't have to engage anything. He doesn't have to warm up the engine. He doesn't have to open the choke, close the choke, give it gas, engage the clutch, hit the starter button. There's nothing. He just gets on the bike and he twists the throttle. It happens so fast. It takes me by surprise every time. And then when he's accelerating, you hear the whine of the electric motor. Like, and then when he gets up to speed, the whining drops. And then as he's riding his motorcycle, it makes no sound at all. It's really kind of freaky. And then, so just watching his experiences on the electric motorbike, it's kind of fun for me. One interesting thing I noticed about his YouTube channel, I was looking at the comments, and there was one person, no, it was on Patreon, because I posted a link to his latest video on my Patreon basically saying a lot of things I just said. I'm watching these videos, they're interesting because he's riding an electric motorcycle. And someone, a member of the Planet Doug Patreon, left a comment to that post and saying they don't like his videos, mainly because, well, two reasons they don't like him. One was because he's using an electric motorcycle in places like northern India in the mountains. There are no chargers up there, so everywhere he goes up to all these hotels, all these restaurants, and he's got like a big extension cord, and he rides up to the restaurant. It's like, hey, can I plug in my motorcycle? Like, he's basically going around looking for places, not with dedicated chargers, but just houses and restaurants and hotels, and asking them, can I plug into your electricity and charge my motorbike? And I saw him do that a lot in his India videos. I didn't think anything of it because the local people are very friendly. They want to help him. And whenever he does that, the people sometimes say, oh, like, we're running off a generator. We don't have enough power. We're not connected to the grid. Or they'll say, oh, there's no electricity today. Or they'll say, well, yeah, you could, but we don't have an outlet outside. We have an outlet, but it's way at the back of the house, and your cord can't reach it. Whatever, they have to talk about it for a while. And then eventually he finds a place where they say, oh, yeah. We have an outlet right here. You can plug in there. And then they negotiate how much he pays for it. Or they might say, it's free, don't worry about it. Or they'll say, oh, give us this much money. So I saw him doing this a lot, and I didn't think anything of it. But the person who left the comment on Patreon said he was annoying a lot of people. So this person's opinion was, as he was doing this, constantly asking whether he can plug in his motorcycle, he's being a pain in the butt. She put, I think, put in her comment, PETA, pain in the, I'll say butt, pain in the butt. And it's a hassle. So she doesn't like his journey from that point of view. And his videos, he uses a lot of profanity in the title and the thumbnail. He doesn't write it out. He kind of bleeps it using asterisks. So he's, what the? And then he writes the English profane. No, there is nothing wrong with your laptop. There's nothing wrong with your smartphone. There's nothing wrong with your tablet. The audio disappeared because the battery in my Rode Wireless Go microphone died. And Yeah, it's like one of those comedy of errors. Like when a big problem happens, it's usually not, like when you make a big mistake, it's usually not just one thing. It's like a combination of things come together to create that problem. So for example, I normally see the blue lights on top of the microphone. And if you see the blue lights, you can tell it has power and it's still connected to the receiver, and the receiver is connected to the GoPro. But last time when I was talking like this, I put the microphone underneath my shirt, and that was because I'd watched this video by Philip Bloom, a YouTuber, professional photographer, professional videographer, and a YouTuber, and he posted a video where he was reviewing all of the new wireless microphones out there, and then he talked about how he hates seeing the microphone, that it just annoys him if he's watching a video and you can actually see the microphone. He doesn't like that it has branding on the front. He particularly doesn't like the lights. So he was all about small, unobtrusive microphones that you can hide somewhere and you don't see them. So I had all of that on my brain. So instead of sort of hanging this on the outside of my shirt, I put it under my shirt. And people talk a lot about wind noise. And I'm not usually worried about wind noise because I'm sitting here in the room, so there is no wind. But because people talk about it so much, I put this little wind muff on. And one problem with the Rode, the system, the design of their microphones, is that when you put on the wind muff, it covers up the lights. So you can't actually see the lights anymore. So even if I'm looking down, like out of the corner of my eye, quite often if I don't have the wind muff on, I can sort of monitor the blue lights. And as long as I see kind of a blue light down here, I know I still have power. But with the wind muff on, it covers up the blue lights and you don't see. Anyway, and the other problem was normally every time I begin like a Planet Doug podcast, I make sure that everything is charged 100%. So I start with 100% batteries across the board, fully charged, GoPro fully charged, whatnot. But my life has been pretty chaotic recently with the launch of the Patreon. I'm doing all kinds of different things. My life is kind of in upheaval right now. And the last time I used the Rode, right after I finished, I didn't charge it up. So it started off already like at half power or 1/3 power, and I forgot about that. So anyway, when I was recording this podcast, the Rode transmitter battery died. The receiver was still working, it still had power, it was still connected, everything seemed fine, but I didn't know about it, that the microphone died. And one thing about the GoPro is even when it stops getting a audio signal from the microphone, it just keeps recording the audio input from the microphone. So essentially, I did keep talking after that. When the microphone died, I moved on. I went on and on and on talking about Marc travels. I had all kinds of things to say about him. And then I think I moved on to another YouTuber. And then I went into pop culture because I promised I was finally going to talk about TV shows and movies. And I think I talked for another 2 hours about TV shows and movies. And my memory is I said all kinds of amazing things. I was eloquent, I was passionate, I was insightful. And then I went on and on and on. And when I finally got to the end and I copied all of the video files, all of that video has no audio. And I had no other gear running. So I don't have any kind of a backup. Yeah, there was absolutely nothing. And yeah, so that's what happened. So normally this wouldn't happen to me, but to be honest, it is my fault because I'm aware of the possibility. whenever I'm using the Rode wireless microphone, I'm aware that it can run out of power. I'm always thinking about it. I'm always thinking about how long the GoPro battery is going to last, how long this battery is going to last. I stay on top of these things. And many, many times I thought to myself, well, while I'm in my hotel room recording a podcast, I don't need to use this. The whole point of a wireless microphone is that you don't have a wire between you and the camera. So you can walk away from the camera, you can put down the camera in your bag, you're free to move around. That's the advantage of a wireless system. But here, sitting in my room, recording a podcast, it doesn't matter. Like, why am I even using a wireless microphone? Because the GoPro is right here. So it doesn't move, I don't move, and the wire is more than long enough to reach from me to the GoPro. So I thought many, many times, you know what? I should stop using a wireless mic and switch over to USB power and a lavalier microphone. And I said that to myself mentally over and over, and I just never did it. And now I finally paid a big price for that mistake, and I'm never going to make that mistake again. So from now on, I've learned my lesson. When you're recording in Planet Doug Studios in my hotel room, don't use a battery in the GoPro. It will get too hot, and the battery it's going to shorten the life of the battery because it's going to start expanding. So plug in USB-C power and don't use a wireless microphone. Use a lavalier microphone. And I'm very curious how this sounds, to be honest, because I don't know if I've ever done this before. I've used the lavalier mic plugged into the Rode, because you can do that. What I like to do is I don't even put this around my neck quite often. I'll put this in my pocket, and then I plug this, you can't even see it, but I've got a tiny lavalier microphone right here clipped into my cord that I have around my neck, and then it runs from my pocket underneath my shirt and then clips to my shirt or something like that. So what I'm trying to say is I've used the lavalier mic, but only plugged into the transmitter, into the Rode microphone. I don't think I've ever plugged it directly into the GoPro, because one limitation there is now that I've plugged the lavalier directly into the GoPro, I have no control over the levels. It's like a direct feed, and whatever the audio level is, that's what it is, and I'm going to have to raise it or lower it in the editing program. With the microphone, well, you do it with the receiver. With the receiver, you can adjust the output to the camera, and you can raise it and lower it and dial it in. But with this system, I can't. So this is going to be a complete surprise to me what this sounds like. And there's a little bit of a gear design issue. Again, this is going to be hard to understand without doing it yourself. But the way these lavalier mics work, when you buy one, it comes with a little clip. And the clip is designed for shirts with buttons, so that you actually have an opening running down your chest, and then the clip can go into your shirt this way, horizontally, and then the microphone is pointing up towards your mouth. But of course, I'm always wearing a t-shirt, so there's nothing for me to clip the microphone to, and then so what I end up doing is trying to clip it to my shirt collar, but then the microphone is underneath your chin, so it's a little bit covered up. Your voice has to go around your chin and then underneath to your neck. Plus, because the collar goes this way, now when you take your lavalier clip, it goes down, and then no matter what you do, your microphone capsule is pointing to the side rather than pointing straight up. And I think they design another clip. So, but it's like another shopping expedition. Like, I mean, I don't have a whole lot of time left on this planet, right? I can count the number of days I'm probably going to live from this point on, right? The clock is ticking. And how many of those days do I want to spend it at Malahayati Plaza in Kuala Lumpur, going from store to store to store, asking them if they have a lavalier clip that goes vertically instead of horizontally. And I'm going to be going to all these stores trying to explain this to all these store clerks, and they're going to have no clue what I'm talking about, because when it comes to all this kind of gear, I tend to dive into it pretty deeply. Then by the time I'm ready to go shopping, I know more usually than the store clerks do. So I'm trying to explain to them, it's like, okay, what I'm looking for is the clip for a lavalier mic. You know, I'm trying to tell them, and they're going to go onto the shelf and they're going to pull down a lavalier mic. Oh, here you are. It's like, no. You're not listening to me. Please focus. You know, I have a lavalier mic, and I'll get it out of my knapsack and I'll show it to them. See, I have one already. I don't want to buy a lavalier mic, but this one has a clip, and this clip goes horizontal. I want the lavalier clip that clips vertically. And then they're going to look at me like, you know, they'll call over somebody else. You deal with this insane foreigner. I have no idea what he's talking about. And anyway, how many days of my life do I want to devote to this search for the right gear? I don't want to spend a lot of time doing it. I do enjoy it, to be honest, but still, it's sort of like, now I got to go shopping for a lavalier mic that does this, that does that. Where am I going to get it? And anyway, so that is what happened. The battery died, and I have no audio, so I'm just concluding the podcast here. Everything that I said about TV shows and movies, that's going to be hopefully in the next podcast, and is going to be recorded by this lavalier mic. But Philip Bloom wouldn't approve of this either, because he likes lavalier mics, but I have it on this green cord and it's exposed, and he's not going to like that. But hey, this is Planet Doug Studios. I am not a professional videographer in any way. All right, with that, with the story of the battery drama and the microphone drama, that brings me to the end of the Planet Doug podcast episode for today. And I'm going to shut down. I hope you enjoyed that a little bit. What did I talk about? Oh yeah, I talked a lot about the Patreon launch, everything I learned about Patreon. My learning curve is still going crazy. I'll save the stories for the next podcast, but I have a lot of things to talk about. You'd think I'd run out of Patreon stories, but I'm not even close. I have so much I'm trying to learn and figure out and adjust, and I've done some very interesting things. So yeah, in this podcast I talked about Patreon, the launch, the things I'm learning, and then I talked a lot about, Paddy Doyle, his new video series in Thailand. I found that quite interesting. All the gear that he's using, the mystery gear, he's filming with invisible cameras and invisible microphones. And I really want to understand how in the world he's managing to do that. And then I talked about Itchy Boots, Nora Lee with her adventures in Iran, Iraq, crossing the border. I found that to be quite interesting. And did I talk about Eric, the Unamoto guy going around the world from Canada? Maybe I did, I can't remember now. And then I talked about Marc Travels, and that's where the audio disappeared. So that is where I'm stopping my stories for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for keeping me company on Planet Doug inside Planet Doug Studios. It's nice to have people out there that I imagine are listening to me, and it helps me tell my stories. And it's fun. I enjoy it. So if you enjoyed that, I hope you come back for the next one. And if you do come back for the next podcast, I'll talk to you then.